Have you been concerned because not only have you struggled with sleep, you also have OCD, and you're wondering if this will make it harder for you to leave the insomnia struggle? Or you're wondering if OCD actually is causing insomnia? Or you're wondering what to do if you're struggling with both? Or you just want to understand OCD in our NADO framework? If any of those brought out a yes for you, then this episode is for you. We're going to understand what OCD is in our insomnia framework, answer the questions I brought up just a second ago, and find the way to peaceful sleep and peace of mind, regardless of what we've struggled with. Hi there, and welcome to another Insomnia Insight episode. I am so glad that you are here. And firstly, shout out to Mallory, who left a comment 5 days ago asking something. It wasn't exactly like this. It was something like, do you have an OCD episode? And this has come up a few times before, and we haven't. So I was like, okay, it's time. It's time to make this OCD episode now, especially since I very recently reviewed NADO 2.0, or kind of our new framework, where we're really taking everything we learned from insomnia and we've contextualized it for really any version of the inner struggle. But again, thanks, Mallory, for bringing this up. And in the past, when somebody said, hey, do you have an OCD episode? I've always said, check out Talking Insomnia number 66 and 67 with Andreas, who was a guest here on the channel, because we have a really nice discussion. And all of that episode predates NADO 2.0 by years. You know, the seed, kind of the seed ideas, the direction was still going where we are now. So I think even though these episodes are old, they're kind of contextualizing what we're going to talk about today in a kind of a real life example, right? So check those out. And also, you can finish watching this episode and then go back to this one, or do it the other way around. Either way, but what I will say is that the recent episode that doesn't have a number, so it's hard for me to say, watch this episode. But if you Google NADO 2.0 Our New Way, or just search here on YouTube for NADO 2.0 Our New Way, you'll find it. It's kind of a longer episode where I do an overview over our new framework, or our updated NADO framework. That one will give you a lot of kind of baseline understanding that will help with this episode. And so, by the way, principles of NADO, if you're watching this after May 12th, 2025, Principles of NADO, the book where the new framework or the updated framework is outlined, is going to be available. And that also, of course, will give a lot of nice backdrop for this episode. But anyway, that was the whole preamble. Now let's get into it. So what we're going to do today is firstly, we're going to understand how we view OCD in a NADO, and then we're going to explore insomnia and OCD. So first and foremost, let's start talking about tokenization. So tokenization is really like this is a key concept in our framework. And tokenization simply means when our brain identifies something that is inherently harmless, that can do us no harm, as a threat, and this is actually a feature, not a bug. Our brain is supposed to have the capacity to think, oh, maybe this is a threat, and then realize, oh, it wasn't, and then it can kind of detokenize it, say, oh, that wasn't a threat after all. We can let that be. But it's supposed to be able to detect things as threats because it gives us flexibility and it gives us safety, right? If the brain wasn't able to do that, then it would miss a lot of things that were real threats, and we wouldn't have survived until 2025. Humans are still around, so because thanks to this ability to identify something as a threat and see that, oh, it wasn't actually. So this tokenization it's a feature of the brain, but sometimes we can end up in these loops where it's quite tricky because we don't really see the way out. Insomnia, of course, is such a loop, is an example of such a loop. So insomnia occurs when being awake at night is tokenized. It is actually entirely harmless. It's not dangerous for us humans to be awake at night. There's actually no evidence that this causes any bodily harm. There's no evidence that being awake at night causes any mental health issues. There's no evidence that being awake at night causes any health issues. It is in and of itself, it is harmless, but we can go through something stressful in life. We're awake at night, and then our brain goes like, wait a minute, we're not sleeping. This is not good. That's the moment where being awake at night is tokenized. This harmless experience is being looked at as a threat or as a danger. And then what can happen is we become afraid because our brain has identified something as a threat. And as part of our fear response, we're normally more vigilant and more alert. So we sleep less. And then our brain goes like, oh no, the thing I'm afraid of is happening. And then it looks even more like we're in some type of threatening situation, and we're more awake and we sense more that we're in a threatening situation, and that now it's a loop, right? So this feature of our brain can lead us into these loops, which is a bit tricky. So that's why we're here, of course, as we're talking about insomnia and OCD and all the other versions of the inner struggle. But anyway, just reviewing that tokenization is really a core concept to understand. And whenever we're facing any of version of the inner struggle, what we really want to do to begin with is to identify the token. Like, what is the token? Because when we understand what it is that is entirely harmless but has been tokenized, then that gives us understanding and direction. And let's again talk about insomnia here to understand what I mean when I say it gives us understanding and direction. If we see that insomnia comes from wakefulness being tokenized, and it's denoted like this, wakefulness in parentheses T, that just means that wakefulness has been tokenized. It's been started to appear as a threat to our brain. That gives us understanding, because we understand how we ended up having a struggle with sleep. And that's really, really helpful, because we're no longer going to be thinking like, oh, it's my hormone levels. Oh, it's my noisy neighbor. Oh, it's the medication I came off 2 months ago. Oh, it's, my neurotransmitter levels are off. No. This is what's happening. Tokenization happened. That gives us an understanding, and we know why we are where we are. And it also gives us direction, because when we understand that the struggle comes from this misunderstanding in the brain, then we see like, oh, when our brain no longer has this misunderstanding, when it again sees that being awake is no threat, there is no threat, we are in no danger, then the struggle fades away. So here we see the benefit of identifying the token. So now, we kind of provided some background information here. Let's turn to OCD and ask ourselves, how can we understand OCD using our framework? Well, as I just said, the first thing we want to do to contextualize is to find the token. Firstly, we want to find the token. What is it in this version of the struggle, the version we call OCD, that has been tokenized? So to start that, I just grabbed a definition from ChatGPT. I asked it to give us a one-sentence definition, and it provided this. OCD is a mental health condition characterized by unwanted intrusive thoughts, the obsessions, and repetitive behaviors or mental acts, compulsions, performed to reduce distress or prevent a feared outcome. Now, disclaimer here, if anybody hearing this, if you are concerned about your health, talk to your doctor. If you are thinking that you're dealing with a disorder that needs treatment, then of course talk to a doctor. But what we're doing here is seeing how we can look at what's called OCD from a different lens. So anyway, with that said, having read this definition, you can actually pause here and think about, what is a token? What is it that we're attempting to escape in this scenario described, the OCD definition described here? Take a second to think about it. And if you are sort of honing in on the words unwanted and intrusive, then you are on the right path. You're on the right track. You're seeing that the thing with OCD that our brain has thought, this is not good, this is a threat, this is dangerous, we have to get away from this, those are thoughts. So with in the OCD struggle, or that version of the struggle, it is thoughts that have become tokenized. Thoughts are inherently harmless. Thoughts can never harm us or endanger us in any shape or form, but they can be misunderstood by our brain as a threat. This is not a good thought. I shouldn't have this thought. This is a bad thought, etc. That's just evidence that our brain has started to think of thoughts as a threat. Thoughts have become tokenized. Now, what happens when thoughts are tokenized is that it leads into this amplification circle. thoughts are really a means of communication. When our brain tells us like, oh, it's raining outside, then that is a thought, and that thought is produced so that we can take appropriate action. We can decide what we want to do with that information, right? But imagine if you had a really, really important message for a friend, something you thought was incredibly valuable for them to know, and you told them, and your friend kind of just brushed off. I don't have time for that. No, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to listen to that. You would be so concerned for your friend that you wouldn't stop trying to communicate with them. You'd call them, go to their house, you'd shake them, like, you gotta hear this. You need to listen to me. And this just illustrates how when something really important is being communicated, if that communication is sort of blocked or not completed, then the attempts to communicate are going to be just stronger and stronger and stronger. And that plays out inside us as well. When our brain has a message for us, something it wants to communicate with us that it thinks is really important, and we try to block that because we start to think of it as a threat, like, oh no, these thoughts are threats, I don't want to hear it, then the brain's just going to try harder and harder and harder. And that is why thoughts are appearing to us as intrusive. They would never appear to us as intrusive unless we had started to tokenize them and we started to try to get away from them, to block them or avoid them, right? We'd never think of thoughts as negative if we hadn't started to think of them as a threat too. So this is really like getting to how we view OCD. It's really just another example of tokenization, really. And by the way, warning thoughts, which are the ones that become tokenized, kind of fleeting thought like it's raining outside is highly unlikely to become tokenized, right? It's highly unlikely that think, I don't want to hear that it's raining. Stop telling me that it's raining outside. That's unlikely to happen. But a warning thought, like, what if your kitchen sink is infected with bacteria? That warning thought is much more likely to become tokenized, because with a warning thought naturally comes some type of unpleasant emotion, typically fear. All our emotions come from thoughts, and when we think and we have some type of warning thought, that's going to lead to some uncomfortable emotion, and that leads us to think, no, I don't want to have that thought. That thought is no good, right? So that's kind of the root of the tokenization. But my point here is that warning thoughts give rise to safety emotions like anxiety, and when a feared outcome makes us anxious, we will want to prevent that outcome, and we also will want to get away from that emotion. So if we take this, the classical example of OCD surrounding us thinking something is contaminated, then the thought that there's kind of bacteria around us or parasites around us is going to make us anxious, and it's also going to make us think about preventing that outcome of us being sick. So we're going to wash our hands, to prevent the outcome of us becoming sick, and just to get away from the anxiety, to attempt to find some relief, right? So my point here is just that a warning thought will lead to some unpleasant emotion, and will naturally lead to attempts at escaping those emotions and preventing the outcome. It's very, very natural whatever warning thought we have. So if our warning thought is like, oh no, I'm not going to sleep tonight, and I'm going to feel miserable tomorrow, that is going to make us anxious, and it's going to make us try to prevent the outcome and escape the emotion. And this is going to lead to what we call sleep efforts. The sleep efforts is when we do something with the intent and motivation to try to achieve sleep. And this is like taking a supplement or a medication or a gummy, or like blackout curtains or yoga, meditation, anything like that intended to make us sleep is what we call a sleep effort. Now, if we go back to the other warning thought we thought about, like, if these parasites infect me, I'm going to get really sick. That's going to lead to hand washing, And what is my point here is that there's no principal difference between a sleep effort and a compulsion. They're the same thing. They're just a behavior intended to make us safe and to escape an uncomfortable emotion or an uncomfortable thought, for that matter, or like the thought that produces the emotion. So sleep efforts are really the same thing as compulsions, which are the same thing as safety behaviors or coping strategies, or anything we want to call this. In NATO, we call all this simply efforts. These are all considered simply efforts in Ado, and they are an expected consequence of tokenization. If something is appearing as a threat to us and we think that way, it leads to uncomfortable emotions, it leads to attempts to escape those emotions and prevent the kind of imagined outcome. So thoughts, again, are the main token in OCD, but something to just highlight here is that the inner struggle is typically a multi-token experience. So we can also tokenize the emotions. We can have like the, in the version of the struggle that we call OCD, the kind of main token, the key token to understand is the one where the thoughts have become tokenized. But again, warning thoughts give rise to uncomfortable emotions, which we can also start to think are threats. Like, oh no, I'm feeling anxious all the time. I shouldn't feel this way. Emotions can be tokenized. Our behaviors too. We're just kind of observing ourselves, washing our hands like 48 times in 2 hours. And we're like, this is not normal. I shouldn't be behaving this way. Behaviors can also become tokenized. See, there are many things that can be tokenized, but they all lead to the same they only lead to the same direction, right? More warning thoughts, more uncomfortable emotions, more safety behaviors, and kind of this loop it spins around, but all because of the same substrate. The same thing is underlying everything, which is the tokenization. So this now naturally leads us to the what to do part. Like now we understand where the struggle comes from, and now we're looking for kind of direction. What do we do? And I would invite you to check Insomnia Insight 568, which is a very recent one, where the whole episode is really to answer this question of what to do, or expanding on the concept of befriending. But I wanted this to be a freestanding episode. So let's talk about that in a slightly briefer, but more contextualized version here. So tokenization, which we see as the substrate, it's the root cause for the inner struggle, is met in our framework with befriending. And befriending has like these three components, if you will. It's the intellectual understanding, it's the exposure, and it's the self-kindness. So we're gonna contextualize this in the context. I'm using the same word all the time, that's why I'm smiling, but we're going to contextualize it in the context of the tokenization of thoughts here, right? So if we see that, okay, I understand OCD now, it is really just rooted in this tokenization of thoughts. What do we do? Well, the first layer here is seeing that thoughts are inherently harmless. Even if we imagine things like, us, harming ourselves or harming somebody else or something like that, the thought itself is entirely harmless. It's entirely harmless to think of ourselves causing harm. Like the thought is always harmless. And seeing that thoughts are always harmless, they can't produce any danger. They're not a danger to us at all. And they have no meaning. It doesn't mean anything that we have a certain thought. It doesn't say anything about ourselves. We all have all kinds of thoughts, and they have no predictive value. Seeing this is really helpful, and that's kind of like the first layer. We just intellectually understand that there's nothing that needs to be looked at as a threat at all. And the second layer is this like exposure layer, where we see the invitation to have any type of thought without attempting to make it go away. The tricky part here is that when we hear of exposure or befriending, it can sound like actions. It sounds like, oh, I need to take action now. But in reality, the struggle in itself is just driven by our attempts to get away. So there's nothing we need to do. It's all about no longer trying to get away, right? The actions are already in place. Our efforts, compulsions, safety behaviors, coping mechanisms, whatever we're going to call it, they are the ones that maintain the struggle in many ways. So it's really about no longer engaging in them. So what does that mean in the context of OCD? It's see the invitation to have any thought without attempting to make that thought go away. Just sitting with the thought, if you will, observing the thought, whatever you want to call it, whatever you call that absence of effort is the second layer. And then thirdly, see the invitation to be kind to ourselves, even when we try to make the thoughts go away, which we naturally will here and there, right? Even when we understand that, there is no threat, there's an invitation for me to experience any thought without trying to make them go away, but we still find ourselves trying to like do some breathing exercises or distract ourselves or like try to get away from our thoughts. Then we can just be kind to ourselves and see that that's natural, that's normal. Like our brain always wants to keep us safe, and there's nothing strange or unusual with this. And also, when we pressure ourselves, which we'll often do. Often we go like, oh, I should be further ahead. Why am I still struggling with this? I understand it, but I still can't let go, and things of that nature. Those are really forms of self-criticism. There's ways we like pressure ourselves. And when we see that, we can just be kinder and gentler with ourselves. Super helpful. If I'd have to choose between like intellectual understanding, exposure, and self-kindness, what helps the most, I would go for self-kindness any day. I think that I've seen that help so many people in such a powerful way. Now, what we see here is really that this kind of three component way of meeting tokenization, the befriending with these three components, that is not only the way to meet insomnia or OCD, but really any version of the inner struggle where there has been tokenization. So the answer to all versions of the inner struggle is the one we just talked about. And with that said, now we're going to go to the second part of this this class, which is explore kind of the insomnia OCD questions that are so common. And now, like with everything you know now, you can see how it's tricky to give kind of a short answer to this question, which looks so simple, like, does OCD cause insomnia? And you know, the place where this question comes from is very clear to see. Is if we've struggled with OCD and then now we struggle with sleep, we're like, oh, this must have caused that. Like my OCD caused my insomnia. But in reality, the answer is no. It's not like OCD causes insomnia. And we can also, we can prove this to ourselves by kind of anecdotal evidence and observation, which is seeing that there are many people who struggle with OCD who don't have insomnia. Many people with struggle with insomnia who don't have OCD as like classified that way. But in another way, we can see that they're the same. So we can also say that if we struggle with insomnia, well, we could have looked at that as an OCD too, because we will have intrusive, unwanted, obsessive type thoughts. We'll think about sleep all the time, and we will have efforts to try to get away from that. So I think you see here how like it looks like it's such a simple question, does OCD cause insomnia? But the true answer is like it involves some learning, which you have done now. So you can see now that we can either say no, they're just two versions of one struggle, or we can say like no, they're really the same thing. It's just like if you can look at insomnia, you can understand insomnia through the kind of OCD lens, you can understand the OCD through the insomnia lens, or you can understand both through the NAD lens. But anyway, it's not like one causes the other. So similarly, does insomnia cause OCD? No, we already reviewed that, see above. Now, another question, maybe this one, am I going to have a harder time with insomnia because I also have OCD? And the answer there again becomes no. We can never really predict how our path of leaving the struggle will look like, but it's not like, having had OCD makes it harder to have insomnia, because again, they're just the same thing. They're just, flip sides of one coin, should I do this if I have OCD insomnia is a common question. And the answer to that one really becomes anything that is part of befriending will help. If the intent with X, if the motivation with X is to help you understand intellectually that there's no threat, nice. If the intent with X is to be willing to experience something you've tried to avoid without attempting to escape, very nice. If the intent with X is toward going towards more self-kindness and gentleness with yourself, wonderful. So yeah, we will conclude here. I hope this brought a lot of value your way. And as always, comments, questions, put them in the comment section, and I'll try to get to all of them. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in.
Hi there, it's me, Coach Daniel, and I wanted to say thank you to everyone out there who is spreading the word. You know what I've noticed in the last 6 months to 12 months or something like that is when I ask people how they found us, one of the most common answers is somebody told me on Reddit. And every time I hear that, it really warms my heart. It makes me so glad to hear that someone went out of their way to tell a fellow human about the Sleep Coach School. If you're one of those people out there spreading the word, I want to say thank you so, so much. And if you're not, then maybe you'll see an invitation in doing so, or you can simply hit the like button or hit the subscribe button. That alone helps so, so much in getting our teachings out there and helping more and more people in the world. That was all I want to say here. Thanks so much for tuning in, and can't wait to see you again.